Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Jesus reminds us to watch for the signs of his return. Today we will explore further what we are seeing in our times that line up with what signs he said would indicate the potential of the end and his return. We will also discuss the practical meaning of this as we watch and as a remnant prepare as he so leads. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. Here we are on End Times Friday, and this is going to air, I believe, the Friday after Thanksgiving on the 24th.
Yes, official Ricconi decorating day.
Yeah.
So it's a holiday in and of itself.
So our podcast is, called Come and See, Finding Truth in a World of Chaos. The world is in chaos. I think on Friday, your house becomes chaos, right?
Yes, but chaos with purpose.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This will be our official decorating day, which no one can tell at the moment. But it'll be so much fun. Looking forward to it. There will be Christmas everywhere, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. We taped this a little bit early, obviously, and our house we have our Christmas trees up, and next week they officially decorate the house. So we typically do it mid-November, partly because we want to relax during Thanksgiving and then get ready for the season. As this year, our kids are taking us on a cruise in the Caribbean. So
right? Oh, you've got to be getting excited.
So we're excited about that. It'll be warm weather. It's starting to get cold here. How about out there?
Yeah, as we speak, it is officially having mixed precipitation.
Yeah.
So we're hitting the cold, and honestly, I'm in the mood for it. I'm ready for it this year. Bring it on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. As we've been following this saga of the Israel war with Hamas, lots is happening. We try to keep up. Again, by the time it's broadcast, the next things have happened. So we try to just keep up with what we can as we are. So I think as we set it up. On October 7th, they were attacked by Hamas in a massive attack. They took ground activity, came in, went to a music festival, captured 250 plus people, hostages, killed about 1,000, and then they barraged them with missiles. We had discussed that because of the peace treaty that was being developed between Saudi Arabia and Israel, that Netanyahu 4 days before had said we're never closer to peace, partly because of the activity of the Saudis who were representing that Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran were willing to soften their positions, which was necessary in order to get peace.
Right.
So they thought that way. And then, of course, 4 days later, Hamas has this massive barrage against them. The thought was that, because of what was going on, they let their guard down. But then we discovered that the troops were amassing and being trained by Iran. And so because of the skill of the intelligence of Israel, we can pretty well be assured that they knew what was happening. It didn't surprise them. They just decided that because of what they continually were going to do against them, they were going to allow this to happen so that they then could retaliate with a action that was right now. The goal is to eliminate them and never let them do what they're doing in terms of attacking Israel.
Right.
So they then returned it with missiles. They brought their troops to the border at the Gaza Strip. The world, United States, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, even Russia weighed in and said, don't go in. We'll try to see if we can do a ceasefire. They said, okay, we'll wait. the ceasefire from their side was conditioned on Hamas completely handing over all their arms and ending any possibility of conflict.
Right. And hostages too, right?
And giving the hostages, etc. And of course, Hamas said no. They've captured some of the Hamas leaders, and they have, which is kind of funny to me, but they've openly stated, we actually want and are preferring and are working toward a ongoing war with Israel. We want an ongoing war with Israel.
Wow.
So it's not just a temporary thing. It's an ongoing war that perhaps, and by the way, remember who's behind them. It's Iran. And then who's behind that? Russia. And then who's joining that? China. And this is, as we've discussed, out of Ezekiel 38, Gog and Magog.
Gog and Magog, right.
And they're forming up. Right now, it's the alliances that are being put together that ultimately will direct the battle of Armageddon against Israel. And it says the Gog and Magog, the north, which happens to be Russia, and then Syria, Turkey, Iran, China, etc. So things are lining up, and they said they would like an ongoing war, eventually thinking that Iran will join them. And Iran probably has, or at least Russia has, nuclear weapons that they would like to see if they could get to a point of annihilating Israel right now and be the conduit of it. Israel waited a little bit, and then they went in.
Right.
And they crossed the border with their troops and with their elite forces, and they've already destroyed something like 15 to 20 tunnels that carry the people underneath the city to go back and forth. And now their purpose is to just keep going, eliminate all of the ammunition, all of the arms, and try to get everybody to a point where they just can't function anymore.
Right.
Okay, so that's the south. Gaza Strip is on the south. Hezbollah on the north haven't had an all-out war, but they've had more missiles sent.
A little bit of activity. Anyway.
Activity still on the north side, and they've had to defend that. And then Syria joined, and Syria actually went after American troops and American activity. So America is joining the fight on the north and bringing jet missiles, etc., against Syria. So it's really escalating
in very strategic spots, but they definitely are. They're going to protect their bases there.
Yeah, we haven't had an all-out war yet,
right?
But we're active. So right now, where we stand today is that Israel is actively inside of Gaza now, really working toward trying to take it over completely. And their goal is to keep going until they do.
Right.
Hamas doesn't have a lot of capability by itself to really counteract that. So they're kind of in a place where they just want to keep causing trouble. What they would like to do is draw Iran in and draw then Hezbollah and the other ones into the scenario. So again. It's one of those activities where it hasn't settled down. It's accelerating in intensity. And what we are to do is watch it and see which way it goes. Ultimately, there'll be something that will, that will come together and will come to a level of peace of some kind. And we just don't know how far it's going to go to be able to get to that place. And what I see happening is there's two things happening. One, the formation of Gog and Magog is really coming together exactly what the Bible said.
Right. Very fascinating.
They name the countries, and those are the countries that are lining up right now, and they are literally coming together to define what they want to do. And it's always intriguing to me that the scriptures can label things that this, particularly a prophetic thing, this is going to happen, and at this time
with
it's going to be
such detail,
with such detail, and it proves to be absolutely accurate. And because of that, and here's the implication of that, we know that the Battle of Armageddon is those countries that are specifically named that come against them with troops. And because of that, and because it's forming up now formally, our thought is that it's in motion. Now, when we say in motion, we think, well, probably in the next year or two, right? Well, probably not.
Right.
God's timing is always different than our timing, and length of days, can go on and on and on. But as we've seen things now, we've seen a one world government function with COVID. We've seen a group of people, the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, publicly state we're moving toward one world government. The central banks are all moving toward a electronic currency that ultimately would be one currency. Those things are happening. Now we got Gog and Magog forming up, coming together. And so when you look at all those things, particularly with the statement that Christ made, is that the end will come when you see Israel reformed up as a nation, which has now happened as well. So what we would look at as we're considering this is that if in fact it's going to happen in our lifetime, or even in, let's say, our children's lifetime, and that's why I believe God said pay attention in Revelation, is to ask God, go to God, and start to at least let him discuss with us the implication of that. And as we head toward the tribulation, again, and we'll get into this, we'll actually have some sessions on this coming up, the church primarily thinks the rapture is pre-tribulation.
Right.
So that it almost, in what happens, which I think, this is what God wants us to understand. If, all these things are happening, and it's coming, the tribulation is going to happen, and at some point, maybe even in our lifetime, it does happen. If I'm so certain of pre-tribulation, rapture, what's my attitude?
Then you really don't care, but you don't care.
Yeah.
you're not asking the questions. You're not preparing the way that God may say to be preparing and getting ready, because you think you're out of here, so you're okay.
Yeah. So what difference does it make? All those things coming up don't matter. Okay, good, it happens, but even better is I'm gone. I'm taken out. We're going to get into this, that while a lot of churches state that pre-trib rapture is certain, the Bible doesn't say that. Right. And then two is that the big decision that will have to be made by believers, and again, it's likely because remember the tribulation in most discussion is tied to the Antichrist, a individual that now is ruling and is obviously active against Christians. And when the tribulation starts, the Antichrist isn't even identified yet.
Right.
The beast,
not until the middle, right?
Yeah, he's in somewhere between the first start of the tribulation and 3.5 years. He moves into power. He does become identified,
Okay.
And at the middle of the tribulation is when
Is the abomination of desolation.
Abomination of desolation, and he declares himself to be God.
Okay.
And everybody worships him. The false prophet says, yes, he is. That brings God's wrath against the world who's living there. And he says his wrath comes out against everyone who took the mark of the beast.
Right.
Again, let me set the stage with it, is that when the one world government takes over, and they take over not out of force, but out of providing a solution to a problem.
Right.
Okay, well, what's the problem? The problem is an economic problem that, interesting enough, they caused it. And they knew what they were doing, and create a deep, recession, so to speak, where there are hardships, deep hardships economically for people who are really struggling to survive with. At the moment when it happens, there becomes a thought, which will be promoted, that this will be a long time and very little possibility that we can resolve it. And of course, the local governments, national governments, will be providing, well, let's try this. And because they've been working to not trust your governments, they realize that they can't do anything because they're impotent. So the chaos happens with the economic situation. Then the one world government comes forward and says, hey, we've all met, and we have a solution. And the solution is one world currency, one world government. The rulership of the world now is going to be global. You no longer are going to be ruled just by America. You're going to be under the leadership, which the American leadership has said yes to. But the people of the world willingly receive it. So it's not by force, and there won't be primarily a group. And think of right now the divisions. If anybody does anything on a major scale, there's a group of people that are going to come against it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because, well, I don't like that, and you're not, representing what I want. In this case, there's no group that says we don't like that. Everybody says, boy, that's a great solution.
Right, which does show that the crisis is completely everybody.
Yeah, everybody.
It's a worldwide crisis that calls a worldwide solution into place.
Yeah, and as we, discuss what's going to happen with that, and partly, and we'll get into this. That'll have implication even for our future discussions. But the debt is growing and growing and growing worldwide, and because of, not only do you have a massive amount of debt, but because of inflation and the pressure on inflation, the interest rates have dramatically risen. So, for example, at COVID and pre-COVID, you could get a mortgage for about 2.5%, 3%. Because of that, it first of all drove prices up because, well, I can afford more because the interest rate's low. And then two is that because of what happened with COVID, and people realized I can work remotely. And the company said, you can work remotely. Well, then instead of me being in a crime-ridden city or a place that isn't pleasant anymore, hey, I'm going to move to Colorado. I'll move up to the lakes in New Hampshire, and it drove prices up because of just demand.
Right, dramatically, yeah.
And I'm sure everybody remembers that during this time, literally people put their house up for sale, listed it at a certain price. Next week, you get 10 offers, all over list, And whoever has the highest offer over list usually could get it if they could provide cash, by the way.
Right.
And then it drove dramatically the prices raised all over the country because of it, except, by the way, in like cities where they're going downhill with crime and everything else. So the real estate dramatically increased, and people, bought things. Now, that was at 2.5–3% interest. Now, a mortgage is about 8%. So think about that's almost 3 times higher interest-wise than you could get before. So that means your payment, in essence, is 3 times higher. Well, that means that I can't afford as much. So now there's an automatic, what I call downsizing. I was going to have a 3,000 square foot house. Now I can only afford a 2,000 square foot house.
But good luck finding that on the market.
Yeah. And so there's still pressure with that. And because of the increase, this is something that is happening. And by the way, it's going to dramatically happen this next year, is that remember the states, cities, and counties receive taxes through real estate taxes.
Right.
Well, people are going to be shocked this next year when they get their bills, because they have increased 50 to 100% of tax amount that they're going to have to pay the local governments, and that's going to be a reduction on the amount of money I've got to live on. One, and the ability to then buy things called discretionary income. I have less discretionary income. And if we remember when we had Casey on the broadcast, he said there's a lot of pressure governmentally on things that are costing us things that are draining the ability to grow.
Regulations that he talked about, right?
Regulations that are there, and taxes that are increasing. Well, then you start taking more discretionary income out, and right now, on top of that, the debt of the United States is at officially $33 trillion.
Wow.
They were predicting in 2023 a increase of $1.7 trillion in debt. They exceeded that in the first 6 months. So it's going to be not 1.7, it'll be $3 trillion added to the trillions of dollars. Well, the implication of that is that you got to pay the interest to those that hold the debt.
Right.
And our interest payments now exceed $1.2 trillion a year, going up.
Wow.
And so since we already have trouble paying our bills, which is why we borrow, and that's coming from government spending that has no restraint, the debt service is going up. Okay, so that's on a government scale, and that's going to mean more taxes, and it's going to be more pressure. The personal debt of the American people, between credit cards and student loans, and not including mortgages, but cars, is $17 trillion.
Wow.
And so the interest on that, because remember, they're paying it primarily with credit cards.
Right.
And the interest on credit cards is
a high rate of interest,
18%. Yeah. So more and more and more, and people are starting to have difficulty living paycheck by paycheck because they don't have a great savings. And on top of that is pressure for companies now who start to look at economically what's going to happen. I think we're going to shrink, so we're going to start laying off people, which companies are. Now, all during this time so far, the economy, number-wise, appears to be doing okay. So there's a little bit of a false...
Yeah, it's a little fascinating to watch, right?
Yeah, it's a false thought. it'll be it'll be fine. It'll looks like we're going to survive all this because of just the ability of the American economy to do it. But what is building, and I don't know if people remember 2008, we were in the same position. Everything was growing, very high confidence, and then the situation with the mortgages hit, and the big investment banks went under, and then the cascade happened where it was a dramatic reduction, and so I believe that and everybody needs to kind of consider this is it is starting to build. Where, you could look at the economic numbers, and the people who are trying to promote the economy are saying it's good and going to be fine. But right underneath the surface, when you look at, the old proverbial discussion of the duck, that looks calm on top, but underneath, the feet are moving, there's lots of activity underneath the surface that appears to head us toward having difficulty economically, which personally, it'll be the impact on investments, the impact on potentially my source of income, because I may be laid off. My company might have to, or reduce my pay. And then I've got debt, and I've got things that I'm buying. I'm going to have more real estate taxes next year. And it's all in consideration of what is God trying to show to us about what is changing, and there's two questions. It's what's changing today that I need to be aware of and pay attention to, and then two, as we look at the potential of the tribulation coming, what do I need to understand that, and do I need to think that perhaps we're not raptured? And if we're not raptured and we go into that tribulation, how do you want me to live through that?
Right. And what does it look like to live without the mark of the beast?
Right.
Because you're going to have a separate economic system you need set up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And a fellowship and community. And remember, when the world says yes, it says yes out of a solution that really looks terrific. And during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, it is economically terrific. And by the way, a couple things they're going to do is they're going to, and they call it the Great Reset. They've actually labeled it that. The Great Reset is we're going to basically release all debt and start over. Why? Why? Well, because we have one world government, we have one world currency, and we're just going to create a brand new system. In essence, just start, from scratch. Now, there's interesting enough, there's a precedent for that, and it's Israel.
Right.
And Israel would have what's called a Sabbath or Jubilee year, and it would
every
be
7 years, right?
Well, there would be every 7th year would be a Sabbath year, and that's when they go fallow, have the ground go fallow, and take a break. Every 50 years, they would have Jubilee, and they would do a Great Reset, and that was
release all debts and all of that.
All debt, literally all debts wiped out, and let's all start over together. And then, of course, during the next 49 years, people borrow and get in debt, and every 50th year, Great Reset, because they could control it. Their economy was.
When did they stop doing that?
Well, they stopped doing it when they were destroyed in 70 A.D.
Okay.
Because they're no longer a nation,
right?
And just think about your question is. How do you do? You can only do a Great Reset if you can control the whole thing.
Right.
If you can't, you don't have the power to do a Great Reset because it's beyond you. It's bigger than you, and that's what happened. The Jews were dispersed throughout the world, and they no longer could say we have Jubilee because there's nothing to have Jubilee with.
Right.
But
yeah, that makes sense.
If you have one world government that can control it all, it'll be a great reset, and your debts will be wiped out. You'll have ability to be paid by the activity of the government, and there'll be investment, and there'll be jobs, etc. Everything will look good, and because of the chaos and the problem, the deep problem, the solution will, on the surface, look to be very, very attractive. And that's why, as we start to see these things come together, what we're trying to do is keep raising up, pay attention, and begin to get in dialogue with your inner circle, with your small group, with your spouses, family, and begin to discuss with God, what would you have us understand about that? And because of the current scenario, which is a potential recession and lots of things changing economically, we have two questions. What's going on now that you want me to be aware of and be prepared for? And then because you still will provide me covenant. And then as we head to the tribulation, if that is during my lifetime or my children's lifetime, which I think, by the way, and I'll just make the statement, then we'll end it today, is that maybe what we're going through right now is just to really teach our children how to really pay attention,
right?
Because it may wind up in their generation. So
right, and it's important to continue passing the Deuteronomy 6 type principles.
That's right. Yeah. So we're going to go into the deeper into the economics. We're going to go into the rapture. We'll continue to bring update on Israel, but just be aware and start to pay attention to the changes on a global basis that will impact us.
Right.
Which is, I think, one of the reasons why God said pay attention in Revelation is don't, in a sense, put your head in the sand and say, what difference does it make? He said, I purposely am saying to you, it matters. And it matters because I can give you insight based on what? Based on truth.
Right.
And the truth is going to impact you, and you need to know about that truth. But I do have an answer for it. And that's the good news. So we'll pick that up next time when we go into it, and hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving weekend.
Absolutely.
And the good news is, at least this weekend, relax and have a good time.
Oh, love it. Thanks so much for sharing all your wisdom and insight. As always, it is a pleasure just to hear and to for all of us to benefit from your experience and just the research you do even on all of this to help keep it in front of us.
Yeah, thank you.
So we appreciate that. So thank you. And thanks for joining us, everyone. If you have any questions, send them in to questions@abideministries.com.
Yep,
and we will see you next time.
Yep.
Take care.
Yep. See you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.